social process theories are about emphasizing that interaction between individuals and a larger society. So there are three major social process perspectives then. We have the social learning theory, which in a nutshell basically means that people are born good and they learn to be bad. So people learn techniques and attitudes of crime from those close to them. Social control theory is basically people are born bad and they learn to be good. And so everyone has the potential to be criminal, but most people are controlled by their bonds to society. And so then crime occurs when those bonds are weakened or broken. And then social reaction theory or labeling theory is basically, well, whether you're good or bad, people are controlled by other people's reaction. So people become criminals when significant members of society label them as bad or criminal, and it's that self-fulfilling prophecy. So we're going to talk about social learning theory here first. So within social learning theory, basically criminal behavior is learned. So crime, then, people learn the norms, the values, the attitudes, and the behaviors themselves. So they learn criminal attitudes and behaviors and all of this typically from close friends and relatives. So it's not just about how to commit crime, but it's also about how to normalize it, why you can sort of agree with these values and still be a good person, the attitudes, all of those are sort of part of what you learn. So differential association is the most well-known social learning theory. This was Edwin Sutherland in 1942. And that is, those are other Sutherlands. So that's Kiefer and his dad, Donald Sutherland, who's Canadian, by the way. Sutherland, Edwin Sutherland, he was the theorist who coined the term differential association. So other people have used it since. But in general, he talked about 9 principles. And he also was a member of the Chicago School. And so he kind of, in general, he rejected the idea that crime is the result of some criminal type or some kind of psychopathology. And he said criminal behavior is learned. And that it's the social context that contributes to criminal behavior. So first principle is that criminal behavior is learned. Second principle, learning is a byproduct of interaction. That means that it isn't enough to simply live in a crime-prone area or a lower-class area. Crime occurs because of what we learn from our interaction and our communication with others. The third principle is that learning happens within intimate groups. So it's because these are the people who have the most influence in our lives. So being part of some large group that's trying to tell us something that we have no connection to, that's not going to affect us the same way as it being people who actually influence our lives and who matter to us. The fourth principle is that it includes that this learning process includes the techniques of committing the crime and the motives. So the techniques, you'll learn things like, well, whether it's a simple crime or a complicated crime, there are techniques to committing crimes. Whether it's how to choose a victim or how to choose the right house to break into, or how to pick a lock, or how to commit online fraud and identity theft. So there are certain techniques that you need to know to commit a crime, but it's also about the motives and the drives, the rationalizations, the attitudes. So there's that part of it as well. And the fifth principle is that perceptions of the legal code influence motives and drives. You can't see that, it's kind of under my picture there, but perceptions of the legal code influence motives and drives. And that means that the specific direction of motives and drives that's learned from definitions of the legal code as either favorable or unfavorable. And so if you see the law as like stupid and why bother, well then that's going to change your motive, versus if you see the legal code as valid but you feel the need to break it for some reason, that's going to change your motive and your drive and how you commit your crime. And that those perceptions are also learned. So the sixth principle then is the idea that crime is, and this is a quote, it's like you just sort of learn this sentence when you're learning about differential association, but it is an excess of definitions favorable to violation of the law over definitions unfavorable to violation of the law. That means that there's this weighing process that happens, and if you have more things in your mind and in your value system that basically say, breaking the law is okay, versus things that say, no, we shouldn't break the law. If you have more of those definitions that favor breaking the law, you're more likely to break the law, and you're gonna you're gonna commit a crime when you can basically justify it to yourself enough. And so then the seventh principle is that these associations that we have with other people, they vary in frequency, duration, priority, and intensity. So frequency is how often we see people. So we may have people in our lives that have been with us a long time, but we only see them, once every year or two. And so that's a different frequency than people that we see on a daily basis. Duration is how long we have had that relationship. So how many years can you go back and say this person has been in your life? Priority is how early in life it started. So you may have had a relationship with somebody when you were really young. You don't have a relationship with them anymore. That may still be higher in priority than somebody that you developed a relationship with after, and you've actually had a longer relationship with them, but it was later in your life. So it's going to look different in terms of that priority. And intensity is the importance of that person who's providing the definition. So for example, the importance of a parent is going to outweigh the importance of, say, an acquaintance or a cousin. And that ties into frequency and duration and priority. So basically, the more frequent that we that the associations that we have, and the longer duration, the higher priority, and the higher intensity, that's going to make it so that those people's teachings to us are going to be more likely to stick. And so we're going to learn more from the people that we see more often and we have closer relationships with. So the eighth principle is that learning involves the same mechanisms, whether we're learning criminality or conformity. So it's this, it doesn't matter what you're learning, if you're learning how to commit crimes or you're learning how to bake, it's the same process, it's the same internal process, and all these principles are the same. So it's just the content changes in terms of what you're learning. And the ninth principle is that crime then is the expression of needs and values, but it's not explained by those needs and values. This means that while criminal behavior is an expression, so we express what we need and what we value, we can't use those needs and values to explain why they're committing these crimes. So needs and values drive all behavior, not just criminal behavior, and so you can't use it to explain criminal behavior. So differential reinforcement is then another little bit of different take on the social learning idea. This was Akers and Burgess in 1966, and there they are, the two of them. And so basically this takes elements of differential association from Sutherland and then operant conditioning. So remember Skinner's operant conditioning, he talked about positive and negative reinforcement and positive and negative punishment. We went over that. And so it takes it combines that operant conditioning with the differential association to create differential reinforcement. And so basically they said then that they propose that people are first indoctrinated into deviant behavior through differential association with deviant peers. And so through differential reinforcement, they learn how to reap rewards and avoid punishment according to those people that they're actually spending time with and identifying with. So the people whose opinions actually matter to them and who can provide those punishments and rewards. And definitely that would include formal punishment. So these are their main influence on behavior then are the people that control those reinforcement and those reinforcement, whether it's rewarding behavior in some way, but also the punishment. And so that whether that's deviant peers or some other deviants in your life that's teaching you how to behave, it's typically peers, but. So they're not only providing those either rewards or punishments, but they're also providing behavioral models and sort of what's considered normal. So if you are, say, in a gang situation, and then you're trying to join a gang, you're trying to move up in the gang, you're going to model what the people who are further ahead of you and who have more respect or further up the chain, you're going to model those people and you're going to try to do what they do. And so then they are also going to be the ones doling out punishment or rewards for you, and that's going to change your behavior. So it's that combination of punishment and rewards sort of combined with differential association that creates this differential reinforcement. Then neutralization theory is This was Sykes and Matza in 57, and they basically start off with the idea that nobody is all good or all bad. Even the most committed criminals are not committing crimes all the time. They spend most of their days not committing crimes. So even also even those who conform most of the time will behave in some way that goes against conventional values at some time. So even if that just means drinking to excess or like gambling or watching porn or whatever it might be, even the people who generally follow the rules will still kind of skirt on the edge of them, at least from time to time. So we all have like this mix of values. Nobody is all good or all bad. And so this neutralization theory then began with Sutherland's statement about the idea that criminal behavior is learned in the process of interaction. And so the focus then looked at the part of the process that involved learning rationalizations that go along with being a criminal. So that's what they zeroed in on, was those rationalizations that happen. And so this is one kind of rationalization, is just blaming somebody else. But these are, if you guys don't know who these guys are, these are the Sedin brothers from the Vancouver Canucks. They are twins that play on the same team. But that was sort of, the neutralization theory basically has a whole lot of different ways of what are called techniques of neutralization. So criminals know that their behavior is wrong. That's kind of the basic underlying assumption of neutralization theory, is that they're not just like willfully ignorant to the idea that they're possibly hurting people or taking things that aren't theirs or whatever they might be doing. They know what they're doing is wrong, at least according to societal standards. And they feel a certain amount of shame and guilt. And so criminals drift from one extreme to the other, where they kind of go from criminality to restraint. And so then that results in behavior that's sometimes free or deviant and other times constrained and rule-abiding, which comes back to the idea that nobody is committing crimes all the time. And so they have it's called that drift. They drift back and forth. And it's because these criminals, they know, they feel guilt and they feel shame for what they do. So then they have to neutralize that shame and guilt. So they use these techniques of neutralization or rationalization to justify and explain their behavior to themselves as much as to anybody else. And so otherwise, they're just going to constantly be feeling bad about what they're doing. So denial of responsibility, this is basically saying, well, it's not my fault. The crime happened because of some force outside my control or an accident or somebody else made me do it. So it's seeking a scapegoat of some kind. Denial of injury is where they're saying, well, nobody was really hurt. It wasn't as bad as these other crimes. They have insurance, so who cares? Those kinds of things. Denial of the victim is saying, well, you blame the victim. So, the victim had it coming, or, she seduced me even though it was, my therapist client, or, a young child. Well, they seduced me though. So it's either blaming the victim like that, or you totally dissociate from the victim. So saying, well, stealing from a large department store, there's no real victim there. And then condemning the condemners is another technique of neutralization. This is where you shift the blame to people in authority. And so, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and this criminal justice system isn't fair, and teachers and parents aren't fair, and if I don't do it to him, he'll do it to me. Those kinds of things. And then appealing to higher loyalties. This is basically the idea that if you're being loyal to another group by committing crime, you're, being strong or proud is better than backing down from crime. And only cowards run away, or I have to protect my buddies, or the bottom line is all that matters if it's a financial crime. So any of these things are basically techniques that people use to justify their own behavior that they know is wrong. And it allows them to be okay with the crimes that they are committing. And that's why I've got the little guy here that says, well, would you believe I'm following a higher law? So that would be an appeal to higher loyalties. All right, so those are, in general, the social learning theories. And so there are some critiques that you can see on the next slide, but we'll stop there.